start by saying that I've been catfished twice. I am here and well, so y'all can rest assured that this story doesn't end too terribly. As we all know, there are many different ways to meet people. You could meet someone in person while you're out, or with the creation of the internet and the many dating apps that have come out. I'm thinking about apps like Hinge, Tinder, Bumble, and I'm sure there are many other apps that I'm not even aware of that exist that help you to meet new people and make dating really easy. And while dating can be fun and exciting, it can also be a bit risky. I wanted to make this video as someone who's been on a good number of dates and to share some of the things that I've learned along the way, and I came up with 10 tips on how to keep yourself safe while dating. I did want to note that I'll be speaking from the perspective of a female who dates males, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, tip number 1, meet in a public place for the first date. When I knew I was going to be moving to Boston for grad school, I figured it might be a good time to use dating apps just because I was going to be in a new area. And so I downloaded Hinge. That's the only app I use to get to know people and, go on dates. I'll say this. From talking to people on this dating app, you will likely speak to people that want you to come to their place for date number 1. Tip number 1, as I mentioned, is to meet in a public place. Do not meet someone at their house for the first date or at a hotel room, just because then you reduce the amount of control you have over your environment. Plus, there won't be any witnesses in case something terrible happens. You should maximize the amount of control that you have for date 1, because what's really happening here is that 2 strangers are meeting up and you don't know this person, and you need to maximize the amount of control that you have over the environment. Ideally, a restaurant or a bar or a coffee shop, somewhere out in public where there are other people around and you can maximize your own safety. Moving along to tip number 2, don't let him pick you up for the first date. You don't know this person, thereby you probably shouldn't let them know where you live yet. If things don't go right on the date, now they have access to finding you quickly because they know where you live. I did want to tell y'all a brief story with regard to not letting someone pick you up for the first date. I am here and well, so y'all can rest assured that this story doesn't end too terribly. But again, it's a word of caution to my ladies out there going on dates. It's not a good idea to let someone pick you up on the first date because you lose some control when you let someone do that. Alright, so in this experience that I wanted to share with y'all, I think we spoke on FaceTime maybe for 30 minutes or an hour. I got a chance to really get to know him. He was really funny. He seemed like a good person. And so we agreed to have him pick me up for the first date. We agreed that we would go hiking. In retrospect, I look back and I'm just like, what was I thinking? Letting this stranger pick me up to go hiking together. Literally, I'm giving him the best place to kill me and bury me and no one will know, but anyway. So I let him pick me up and, everything was going well. We drove out, I want to say maybe 50 minutes. Again, I'm thinking oh God, the mistakes that I make sometimes. So we drove 50 minutes, we're hiking and everything is going well. We're hiking, we're talking about our interests and stuff. He's complimenting me on how I'm moving really quickly and he's struggling because he says he never exercises and stuff. Everything's going well. We finish the hike, we make our way back to his car, and that's sort of when things go wrong. He's in the driver's seat, I'm in the passenger seat, and we're just talking, and eventually he's like, oh, would you want to watch Netflix? I'm trying to be open to wherever the date is going, and so I'm like, sure. And I wanted to be clear about my current state and how I was feeling and stuff. We had just finished this lengthy hike and I just felt really sweaty and gross and I didn't want to be touched, and so I told him that. We were still in the front seat at this point in time. I told him, hey, listen, yeah, we can watch an episode of whatever you want to watch on Netflix, but I really just don't want to be touched. So if we're gonna make our way to the back seat, I just wanted to, let you know ahead of time, I'm just not really feeling very comfortable. I don't really want to be touched. And so he said, no, I understand, that's fine. I totally get it. As a female, you have to think men often want to get physical, and so you just always have to keep in mind, okay, what might he be thinking as we move to the back seat? He wants to watch Netflix. Immediately my brain is Netflix and chill, and I'm just I'm not really trying to chill right now. Like, I'm just trying to relax and like have a good time, We had been having a good time up until that point, and so I figured, nothing would be wrong with us going to the back seat to watch an episode of something. So we make our way to the back seat and everything's going fine. We're watching, and then he tried to touch me. Shortly after we had moved to the back seat, he goes to try to like tickle me, and like it's just really bizarre. I'm like, what is happening? And I feel really violated because I told him literally not even 5 minutes ago, probably, that I didn't want to be touched. And so I'm just like really confused. And then he's like trying to take off my shoe, manages to take off my shoe, and then it is like making his way out the door. And he's like, oh, like, come get your shoe. And I'm just like really confused, and I'm just like, what is going on? What is happening? Not too long ago, I had told him like, listen, like, I don't want to be touched, and I thought he understood. And so it's all very strange. My whole demeanor has changed from being like relaxed to like being really stressed, and full transparency, because I felt violated, I started crying. And so, eventually he picked up that he had done something wrong. And so he's like, what's going on? And I'm just like, hey, listen, can you just give me my shoe back? And then I decided I literally can't be in the car with this person because I don't feel safe. I don't feel like what I say matters, because clearly, like, even though he says he understands something, his behavior says otherwise. And so I am literally 50 minutes away from home because he drove there, and now I need to figure out how I'm gonna get home. Luckily, I had cell service, so I called my sister and told her like, hey, listen, the date didn't go as I thought it would, and so can you come pick me up? And no problem, she came to pick me up. But I tell this whole story to say it is best not to have someone pick you up on the first date, because you don't know who they are, and you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're reducing the amount of control that you have over your environment. Looking back, a lot of mistakes were made, and I just wanted to share this experience so that no one is repeating these mistakes, and you're doing everything that you can to maximize your control in order to keep yourself safe. Moving on to tip number 3, you should watch your drink. Oftentimes we go on dates at restaurants, at bars, coffee shops. As much as many of us don't like to think of it, there are people out there that don't want what's best for you and can do things to hurt you, like spike your drink. As a general rule, you should always keep your drink near you in your line of vision so that no one is putting anything in it that could cause some serious harm. Tip number 4 is don't get dropped home. This is going alongside tip number 2, which is not to let him pick you up for the first date. If you drove to the location that you're having the date, then this is irrelevant because you will drive yourself home. However, if you walk to the location or took public transit, it's a good idea not to let the person drop you home, since you likely still have more to learn about this person, and having someone know where you live is a big deal. So as a way to maximize your own safety, not letting someone drop you home for the first date is the ideal case scenario. I just want to pause real quick. I don't want to scare anyone into thinking that dating is this scary thing that you should be afraid of. It's very fun to get to know new people. You learn so much from, hearing about other people and their experiences and who they are and how they grew up and stuff. It's really cool. There are just some things that you need to keep in mind, because at the end of the day, we are meeting up with someone that we don't know. And so these are just some things to keep in mind to maximize your own safety. All right, let's jump back in. Tip number 5 is be mindful of what you say. For the longest time, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't understand why some women would lie to men to get out of certain situations. I would say, why aren't you just honest? I imagine they can handle the truth, that you're not interested. And I've come a long way since thinking that way, because the truth is that a lot of men have very fragile egos and they don't like to hear certain things. And if you have to lie to get yourself out of somewhere safe, that's what you have to do. I'll share a story with y'all that doesn't end badly. It's just an example of I had to assess whether it was okay to share the truth with someone or whether I needed to lie to get myself out of a situation. This person was significantly larger than I was. I just needed to be mindful of the way that I was going to tell them what I honestly thought to a question that they asked me. So I'll start by saying that I've been catfished twice using Hinge. So one of the times was when I met up with a guy who, from his profile, he seemed to be very athletic, played basketball. He just seemed like a very fit guy. And then when we both met up at this Mexican restaurant, he did not look like his photos. He was the same person. He was just, I would guess, maybe 100 pounds heavier. He ordered our food, we sat down, we were eating, we were talking, and at some point he asked me, "Do I look like my photos?" And I needed to quickly assess whether, from the conversation I'd had, from what we had spoken about, from the vibe that I was feeling, whether it would be okay to tell him the truth about what I really thought. I didn't feel comfortable telling him, "Oh, well, you look 100 pounds heavier than you do in your photos," because I don't know. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but also he was significantly taller than I was and significantly stronger than I am. I didn't think that that would be a good idea, and so I just said, you look kind of different. And eventually we ended up texting more after, and I ended up being more honest over text. But the fact that he was asking me, I think, is indicative of him knowing that he didn't look like his photos. And then he also came clean on the date that he had had an injury, and so that's why he had gained some weight. But I needed to be mindful of the way I said what I said, because I don't know how he's going to react to potentially being insulted by a stranger. And so I just needed to quickly assess whether it would be okay to tell him what I honestly thought. And so I kind of watered down what I honestly thought of the question that he asked me. So ladies, I say all of this to say that if you need to lie to get yourself out of a situation safely, do that. Like, it's okay. Do whatever you need to do to get yourself out of a situation safely. Moving on to tip number 6, sharing location or sharing the date information. So another way to keep yourself safe would be to share your location with someone before going on this date. That way, no matter what happens, someone knows where you are at all times. Another thing that you can do is share the information of the date that you're going on. So for example, you could share with a friend like, "Oh, here's a picture of the guy that I'm about to see. I'm about to see him at so-and-so bar at this time, and I'll text you after." That way, loved ones know where you are and you maximize your own safety. Moving on to tip number 7, asking them for their social media beforehand. A good way to know whether someone is normal is to ask them for their Instagram, their Facebook, just to kind of get a sense of like who they are and how they operate in real life. There are some people, of course, that don't really take to social media, don't have a Facebook, don't have an Instagram, but if you can suss out kind of like who they are from their social media, it's a good way to know how they move in their quote-unquote real life outside of the dating context. Tip number 8 is don't overshare too soon. Throughout the course of the date, you're going to be touching on a whole bunch of different topics, like things that you like to do. Maybe you'll talk about your family, your career. I would say it's important not to overshare personal details. Like, for example, if you do talk about your job, maybe not mentioning where exactly you work. And if you talk about, where you live, maybe not giving too much information on nearby places that you frequent, just because that way you can maximize your privacy and your safety as a result as well. Moving on to tip number 9, trust your gut. Listen to your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably because it's not. I feel like in my life, there have been so many times where my gut's been telling me something's not okay, and I have shoved that feeling to the side and kind of said, no, it's fine. And then something bad happens, and I hate myself for not listening to my instincts. There's a reason that we have a gut feeling. When something doesn't feel right, listen to your gut instinct, because it's trying to tell you something and it's probably important. And lastly, tip number 10 is to have an excuse ready. It's possible that you arrive and the person just doesn't look the way that, they did in their profile, or maybe something about the situation is just making you feel really unsafe. Whatever the reason might be, it's okay to decide, what, I don't want to do this. And again, going back to earlier points, maybe you don't feel safe telling them the truth about, "I'm not feeling this, I don't want to do this, I want to head out." Maybe you don't feel safe or comfortable saying that. That's okay. A way to prepare for this kind of situation is either to have like a ready-made excuse ready. By this time, I need to be at this place. Or maybe you talk to a friend beforehand and tell them like, "Hey, if I text you, this word or this phrase, please call me." And that way I'll be able to answer the phone and say, "Oh, you need me okay, I'll be there. And that way you're able to get out of the situation without you having to say, I don't feel comfortable, I need to leave. That way it's a ready-made excuse where it'll look somewhat normal to the other person. They might be onto the fact that, you know, you don't want to be there. It doesn't matter as long as, you know, you're in a public place, right? So it's okay. There are people around you. You can, you know, take this phone call and, you know, say, hey, sorry, like I need to go. And that way you're able to get yourself out of a situation in a way that doesn't put you in a tough spot. And that way you can exit the situation in a way that will keep you safe and sound. All right. Those are all the tips that I have for y'all. I hope that you took at least 1 or 2 things from this video. If you did, drop a like, drop a comment. Let me know some of the things that you do on dates to keep yourself safe. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.